Joining us now, former D.C. Metro police officer Michael Fanone. He was part of the team, of course, of law enforcement officers defending the Capitol and the lawmakers inside from the rioters who violently stormed the building on January 6, 2021, after the Trump rally. His book on the insurrection is titled Hold the Line. Officer Fanone, always great to have you with us. You were watching, you were listening yesterday, nearly 3 hours of testimony, and we should remind people what we're talking about here. This is a question of immunity around the election interference case. That is the idea that Donald Trump attempted to overturn the election, the lie that drove all those people to the Capitol, and obviously caused great pain to you and so many other officers who bravely defended it that day. I'm just curious what you thought as you listened to those 2 hours and 40 minutes of oral arguments.
Oh, Willie, I mean, it was pretty difficult listening to these Supreme Court justices debate this in the abstract, having experienced so much of the end result of the former president's conduct firsthand. You know, again, like the guest that was just on was saying, you know, where is the urgency to address the matter at hand, the former president's conduct? I mean, the other thing that struck me is I'm less concerned with what the inevitable outcome is, and I'm not going to speculate. I'm not a legal scholar, and frankly, I don't have a clue. But why has it taken us so long to get here? It's 3.5 years after, you know, the American people witnessed firsthand, you know, what Donald Trump's supporters did, inspired by his lies and a scheme, this elector scheme to subvert democracy, when they stormed the Capitol and beat the hell out of police officers. You know, why did it take that effort? Why did we need a congressional select committee to investigate this and spoon feed the American people probable cause, spoon feed Merrick Garland probable cause before the Department of Justice would get its act together and pursue criminal charges against the former president? All of these missteps and mishandlings of this conduct has resulted in, you know, what we all now, I think, have come to accept, which is this effort may be too little and too late. The American people will not have the benefit of seeing a criminal trial in which this conduct is laid to bear for all Americans, so that we can fully appreciate and understand and make a decision come November in the election.
Michael, book's called Hold the Line. That's what you faced on, you know, it's a physical matter, practical matter on January 6th. But tell us about the other lessons in the book, you know, particularly, I mean, when you wrote the book, you might have hoped that we would have more of a resolution on the legal front. But again, it was, you know, it's up to you all on January 6th to protect the Capitol. It's up to voters on in November to protect the democracy. But what other lessons are you taking from this in the book?
I mean, one of the biggest lessons that I think, you know, I came to realize was, you know, how these institutions that I came to depend on to protect things like our democracy really don't do anything at all. It's not the institutions, it's the individuals that occupy positions within those institutions. You know, it wasn't the D.C. Police Department and the United States Capitol Police Department that defended the Capitol building that day. It was individual officers, officers that made the conscious decision to go to the Capitol, whether part of an organized effort or just, you know, individuals who self-deployed like myself and hundreds of others, because what they saw happening before them was wrong. It's as simple as that. You know, members of the Department of Justice who refused to be corrupted by the former president and stood up against him. And, you know, that brings me to another point. We talk about accountability for the president's actions. I haven't seen any accountability for what Donald Trump did, and he may never be held accountable. But there have been consequences for January 6th. Consequences for people like myself, average, everyday Americans who stood up to Donald Trump, who stood up to the MAGA movement, and had their lives torn apart and decimated through death threats, losing their careers. I know 10 members of Congress who voted to impeach the former president. 8 of them don't have their job anymore. So there is a huge ripple effect in what the former president has done that has really torn apart a lot of Americans' lives and livelihoods.
I wanted to follow up on one other aspect of this. Based upon what you went through and what you saw, what do you think we have to be doing now to prepare for political violence, say between Election Day and Inauguration Day? What do we have to do in the way of training, or do you basically, are you at all comfortable, or are you, uncomfortable with what you see as the potential threat and the capability to meet it?
Well, first and foremost, I think U.S. Capitol Police, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department, as far as the individual officers are concerned, I think the training is there. And I think since January 6th, or I would hope at least, that some equipment improvements have been made. That being said, law enforcement needs to stop considering the optics of situations and simply do what they're supposed to do, which is prepare for the worst possible scenario. I think that there was a lot of concerns, whether you're talking about January 6th insurrection or whether you're talking about the summertime riots that preceded that, that the optics of, police officers in enhanced protective equipment, which when you really think about it, it's ludicrous because the equipment exists to protect the officer. It's not a weapon, it's protective gear. But that was somehow intimidating, and that, we need to dress those officers down to give the optics that, it's a more calm and serene situation. We know what these events are capable of, as far as violence is concerned, and we need to prepare for it.
Officer Fanone, I obviously don't want to make you relive that day, but it's important, I think, to remind our viewers, because January 6th becomes this big kind of blanket nebulous thing about what you went through that day, suffering a heart attack and burns, and you were beaten with a flagpole and dragged down the steps and started thinking about your family because you thought that might be the end for you. So I'm curious, when you hear the former president go out on the campaign trail and open with his hand over his heart to hear the national anthem with a choir of people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th, who were tried, convicted by juries, and now sitting in prison, when you hear him talk about them as hostages and the idea that he could be president again and release them, offer them pardons, how does that sound to your ear?
I think you know me well enough that you can only imagine what my reaction is. But listen, Donald Trump is sick. He's a sick individual. And the idea that he would align himself with criminals who attacked and assaulted law enforcement officers who were only there doing their job is sick. And anybody that would support that is equally demented.
And you can take those back the blue stickers off your car if you're supporting somebody who backs beating up cops on the Capitol. Retired D.C. Metropolitan Police Officer Michael Fanone, we're so grateful for your service to the country and for your willingness to continue to be out front on all these issues. Thanks for being here this morning.
Thank you for having me.